Welcome to Not My Generation. I am Professor Davenport, and this is my colleague, Dr. Emily Stacey. And this is the political podcast that looks at political events and issues through a generational lens. And so today we're going to be focused on Social Security. However, before we get into that, we're going to touch a little bit on some of the election stuff. The presidential elections are moving along, and we've got some events coming up, right, Dr. Stacey?
Absolutely. Right, so this week we have the all-important South Carolina primary, right? This is kind of the make-or-break situation for folks like Joe Biden, and certainly the down-ballot folks like Tom Steyer and maybe even Klobuchar. This will be a situation in which it's going to be make-or-break, especially for Joe Biden, who has said that South Carolina is his firewall. He has been focused on the minority vote, right? South Carolina is really the most diverse state that we have seen so far. So this will be a big deal for particularly Joe Biden, who did get a pretty decent endorsement last night from James Clyburn.
Right.
That's right. So we'll see how that goes. The debate on Tuesday night was also very interesting. Everybody really went after Bernie Sanders. Obviously, people are getting extremely worried about him taking the nomination.
That's what happens when you're the front runner, right? Is you get a target on your back.
Right. And then, of course, we've got early voting, right? Super Tuesday is next week, March 3rd. So hopefully you have your registration, right? Get your cards out and get ready to go to the polls. Early voting started this morning at 8 a.m. And it will continue tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and Saturday at 9 a.m. So make sure if you are going to be busy on Tuesday that you prepare yourself and find some time in the next couple of days to get to your precinct and make your voice heard.
That's right. And if you early voting is such a convenient thing to avoid kind of long lines in the polls, and given that it's on the weekend too, you don't have to take time from work off, that kind of thing. So it's a great opportunity.
Yes.
All right. So now we're going to shift and talk about a program that will touch all of our lives at some point in time or another.
Maybe.
And impact us. Well, even if the worst case scenario were to happen, it's still impacting us right now.
That's fair.
Correct?
Yes.
So we're going to talk about Social Security. So a little bit of the basics about Social Security first, right? This is a program that was created in 1935. It was designed, obviously, to try to prevent elderly people who were no longer capable of working from being destitute. That's the whole idea here, right? Is to provide some level of base support for these folks. So in their retirement years, in those years where they cannot work, that they are not without food, clothing, and shelter. And that was the idea. Now, how this program works is taxes are paid specifically for funding these benefits that are paid out to beneficiaries. So you as an employee pay 6.2% of your salary into the Social Security system, and then your employer matches that with another 6.2%. And so that goes to the Social Security Administration. Those benefits, and it's important to understand this, I think a lot of people don't get this, understand this. That doesn't go into like a retirement account with your name on it, growing interest and such. Those funds that are paid by all the workers that are paying into the system currently, first are obligated to pay current beneficiaries, right? And so the money you put in goes back out to someone who's retired. If there's any money left over, it is put into the Social Security Trust Fund, which is then invested into Treasury securities, basically, to try to protect, make them safe, and grow a little bit of money over time. Now, all right, I'm gonna say something here, but the Social Security Trust Fund is rather a mythical creature, kind of like the unicorn or Bigfoot, in that Congress has regularly made a habit of borrowing against that money to fund future spending in other areas. And they replace those in effect with IOUs, right, saying we'll pay you back. And they have, over time, they've paid the money that they've borrowed back. But that money really isn't sitting there, so to speak. Now, the retirement age currently is 67 for full retirement benefits, is 67. You can retire at 65 with a little bit less of a benefit. The maximum benefit that you can earn, and this is if you file at age 70, so if you wait a few years to retire, is $3,750 per month, all right? And that's the maximum allowable benefit. The other thing about the taxes that we pay, and this is kind of interesting, a lot of people don't like this arrangement, but there's a cap on how much of your salary you actually pay Social Security taxes on. So for this year, anything you earn over $132,900 is not taxed for Social Security purposes. So it's only on that first $132,000. So if I make $500,000 a year, most of that is not going to be taxed for Social Security purposes. My understanding is that the cap on maximum earnings and the cap on taxable earnings are tied together in the law. So if you were to say, well, let's raise the amount that people have to pay on, say make it $200,000 or $300,000, you would also have to raise the maximum allowable benefit. So it wouldn't raise as much money as you might think, because those would be going out again to current beneficiaries in the form of a higher benefit. So this is the current program, right? Now there are some problems with it, and these problems are pretty much related to demographic changes. And the biggest is the portion of workers paying into the system to support the portion of retirees. I guess we can start blaming the baby boomers for this, right?
It's an alarming statistic, right? I heard about 10,000 are retiring daily.
Right. So you have a large number of retirees, primarily now the baby boom generation, and you have fewer workers supporting them. So one statistic I saw from Stanford University said that when the program was started, you had about 37 workers per retiree, right? Today, that number is about 3 workers per retiree, and it's projected to go down to 2 in the next decade or so. So fewer workers paying for more beneficiaries, you start to see the problem here, right? In addition, those people who are receiving benefits are receiving them for a much longer period of time.
Absolutely.
So now this might stun you. A lot of people don't know this. So the retirement age in 1935, when they initiated the program, was 65 years of age. The average lifespan?
56.
A little bit more than that.
Oh, was it?
The number I saw was 61.
Oh, really? Okay.
But either way you look at it, it appears here that they were pretty much counting on that there were some people who just would be receiving it. They're going to be paying into the system and not get any money out.
Absolutely.
Today, the average lifespan is 79 total. Now, for women, it's a little bit higher than that.
Yes.
And so you have people who are living longer, receiving more benefits as a result because they are living longer. And so these are putting strains on the system. And everybody's looking at how do we fix this? How do we solve this problem? There have been a variety of proposals out there. One of those would be to raise the Social Security taxes, right? And this was done in the 1980s. They went from the roughly 4% to the 6.2% back then. So you could do that. You could extend the retirement age. This has been another proposal to raise the retirement age a little bit more. You could raise that cap, as we mentioned earlier, on taxable earnings. If we don't do anything like that, then the other option is to reduce benefits, and nobody tends to like that. One other thing I will mention about the program here for a second is that there is strong public support for Social Security, right? Even though it's got these problems, and this is pretty much across the board generationally, there's a high amount of support. I think the numbers I saw were that 74% of Americans do not want the benefits reduced, right? 77% believe that it's critical to preserve Social Security benefits. However, while they think it is important, they don't have faith that it's going to be there, right? Another poll said that 24% believe that Social Security will pay out the same level of benefits in the future as it is now, so they think those benefits will drop. Another one said that only 45% of people thought that Social Security would be able to pay out any benefit when they were eligible to retire.
Right. And so just to parse that out just a little bit more, a study that I read, 42%, or poll I read, 42% of millennials believe that they'll be able to reap those benefits from Social Security, so
Sure,
well
right.
under half, and about 38% of Gen Z. So they are, obviously the younger generations are not quite as confident that
Right.
the trust fund is
Right.
going to be solvent for
Right.
them in the future.
The current projection for Social Security is that sometime in the mid-2030s, around 2035,
Right.
It will begin to run out of money. Not begin to run out, it will run out of money. There
completely.
will not be enough payroll taxes paid in to cover the obligations for current beneficiaries at that point in time. That would mean, again, if Congress does nothing,
Right.
that they're going to have to pull money from the general revenue if they want to pay those same benefits, or they're going to have to reduce the benefits.
Right.
And that's what everybody is concerned about. Now, I think everybody tends to agree. I think all the polling that we've seen tends to support this, is that most everybody agrees it's good to make sure that people, when they are no longer able to work, aren't destitute.
Right,
I don't
absolutely.
think anybody has an issue with that. Obviously, how you construct a program can do that can be really important, though.
Yeah.
You want a program that can accommodate these kind of demographic shifts that we've
Sure.
seen, and you want a program that's going to be sustainable long term.
Sure.
I would argue you also need a program that treats workers justly. All right.
Yes.
And so here's the situation that we have now. All right. When you look at age and or wealth, right? What you tend to see is the older you are, the more wealthy you become.
Right.
And so in many cases, what we have is a situation where you have poor working families paying, in effect, we said 6.2%, but if you consider that the 6.2% that their employee matches is lost wages,
Right.
that's roughly 12.5% of their wages that are going to support current retirees who are not poor, who are not destitute, right? People have to ask that question,
Yeah.
is that a fair way of
Right.
doing this? Is that fair to those poor working families that they're giving up this on nothing more than a promise
Right.
from the government that when they retire, they will get something, right?
Right.
Which we've already seen. I think my generation, Generation X, definitely yours,
Yeah.
and Gen Z are not so confident
Right.
that that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And your point about equity, basically, it really does break down demographically as well, right? So disproportionately women, as you mentioned, do live longer, on average 5 years longer than men these days. So they are drawing out more from the system itself. Right now you've got 55% overall beneficiaries of Social Security are women. 96% receiving survivor benefits are also women. People of color as well, right? And so that also lends itself to the just, the
Right.
fairness argument, if
Right.
you will. You've got people of color in this country who are much more likely to be working hourly jobs and lower wage positions, and so they're not being offered those retirement plans in the same way that other folks are. And so your point about the beach, people hanging out on the
hanging
beach,
on the beach, drinking Mai Tais. Right?
Exactly. It's a fair point, and one that I think that your government is going to have to untangle at
some
certain
point.
points.
They would need to. Yeah, and let me give you just some feel for this, right? So the average net worth of those aged 25 to 29 is roughly $40,000, just slightly under $40,000. The median net worth is $8,900, so just
okay.
below $9,000. If you jump to age 65 to 69, average net worth is $1,056,000, right?
Yeah.
Median net worth is about $209,000. So you see the disparity there
Right.
in those folks. Now, again, this isn't to say that everyone who is on Social Security, everyone who's retired is wealthy and doing
Right.
fine.
Oh, certainly not.
That's not
Yeah.
the argument
No,
here.
definitely not.
But it is the situation that, on average, they are more wealthy than those younger groups that
Right.
are having to pay to support that benefit.
Yeah.
A couple of other things that I didn't mention that could help solve this problem. One is increased economic growth. So if you increase the GDP, I think the number I saw was between 1 and 1.5%, you could help solve some of this problem. Another issue is you grow your workforce base, right? Increase the number of workers. The problem with that is, again, this is a demographic issue.
Yeah.
We're not having enough babies
Right.
internally in the country to do that.
I know,
right?
the millennials failing us again.
Just want to mention that. But the other way you can do that, obviously, is increase the number of immigrants that come into the country who come to work.
Right.
Get them into the system legally,
work visas,
paying
yes,
into
absolutely.
paying in Social Security taxes. That would help as well.
Absolutely. I think there is a misconception, personally, within maybe my generation, or maybe your generation, actually, where folks were more dependent on the Social Security as a retirement check, as their full income, rather than thinking about it as a supplemental, right? So again, if you're not invested in a retirement system with your employer, you need to really be working on saving money on the side, which is extremely difficult, particularly for my generation, right? Where the average millennial doesn't have even $25,000 in savings right now, much less the almost $1 million that is recommended by the SSA to retire on.
Right. And the idea is that Social Security would be one piece of a retirement plan, not the sole part of your retirement plan. And so if you're younger, that's how you want to look at this, right? You want to be thinking, how do I prepare for retirement? And how do I prepare for retirement if Social Security isn't there? Right. Even though that's probably not likely, they will take action and something will happen.
Yes.
There will be some system. You need to plan as though there might not be.
Right.
And that puts you in the best position forward. As I mentioned earlier, the reason we want to have this conversation is Social Security impacts all. If you're a worker, it impacts you. If you're a retiree, it impacts you. And so this is one of those government programs that is very broad-based, has an impact on all of us, and you need to understand how it works, why it's in trouble, what are some of the suggestions for fixing it, and then you need to communicate that to your elected officials of, here's the fix I think you should take.
Let me ask you a question, Professor Davenport. What do you tell your Gen Z millennial students when they ask you why I am paying into the system that may not be there?
I tell them because that's the law. and literally, there's if you were looking at this in that way, you have a hard time justifying that.
Absolutely.
Why am I paying to a system that, although there's a promise it's going to be there, at this point in time doesn't look like it is going to be there?
Right.
And the only answer I can really give is we have made a commitment not to allow people who are beyond their work eligible years to not be destitute. And so your payment into that system is part of that social commitment to doing that, right?
Yeah.
And it is unfortunate that Congress has not yet. Now, this is not uncommon. Congress often will push the can down the road until it's forced to make a decision, right?
Sure.
But
especially in election years.
Exactly right. And Social Security has been referred to as the third rail of American politics.
Yes.
One of the reasons why it hasn't been changed is, again, not only are baby boomers now one of the largest populations in the country, they vote more consistently than any other group of people.
Right.
More than my generation, certainly more than yours and Gen Z. And so politicians understand who their voters are.
That's right.
They understand who's going to be making those decisions, and they're going to tailor their policies to those people, not to people who complain about it but never show up at the polls.
Yes, this is what I tell my students all the time. If you are a millennial, Gen Z, you really ought to be paying attention to politics and certainly your candidates. They should be catering to your needs more so than perhaps the older generation.
These things impact all of us, and it is an important point to understand that we need to be engaged, right? And be engaged is not just showing up at the polls, but communicating to your elected officials.
Absolutely.
What do you think they should do? Holding them accountable, right? Being engaged is getting involved in an interest group that you are concerned about and that you are passionate about, that will allow you to more fully advance that issue. There are all ways of being engaged, and that's part of what makes democracy work, is that the citizens actually get out and do things to voice their opinions and hold elected officials accountable. And with a program as massive as this is the largest single program of the American federal government. It's important that we all know the basics about it. We all know why it's in trouble and what some of the opportunities to fixing it can be. So it will be there for those future generations.
Right.
Is that it?
That's all I got.
I think we're wrapping up. This has been a great conversation. I hope you guys have learned a little bit about this system that does impact your life. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.